we must never forget that no government schemes are going to perfect man. We know that living in this world means dealing with what philosophers would call the phenomenology of evil, or as theologians would put it, the doctrine of sin. There is sin and evil in the world, and we're enjoined by Scripture and the Lord Jesus to oppose it with all our might.
Coming to you live from the corner of Fauci and Burks on Constitution on Fire Avenue, it's the America Held Hostage podcast. America's Constitution in Quarantine. Now here are your hosts, Jeff Dornik and John Hinton.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of America Held Hostage podcast. Before we get started, just a reminder, we do have Pastor Sam Jones' new book coming out this summer called 5 Steps to Kill a Nation. Check that out. Go to gatekeepersonline.com/store for more information on that. But Sam's doing a very, very good job. He's literally writing the last chapter as we speak. But it's great information documenting the downfall of America in more recent history, what's contributing to that, and what we can do to turn things around. So, Pastor Sam Jones' book, 5 Steps to Kill a Nation and How to Stop the Bleeding. Go to gatekeepersonline.com/store. You can use either code Jeff or John, and you'll get 10% off of anything there in the store. I know we're going to be adding some more resources and books and that sort of thing in there as well. So, again, we're just trying to bring you guys whatever resources we can, things that we know are going to be good and beneficial to you guys. So, check that out. So, John, we are back. This is episode number 14, I believe. So it's nuts that we've been in quarantine for this long.
Yes, and we have a countdown in our house. And actually, I am going to take, in an unprecedented move, I'm going to do this live for people that are watching. I'm going to take my laptop with me and show you the countdown we have in our own house. America Held Hostage Quarantine Day number 38 here in New Jersey. You can see it right there. So it has been just got off the phone with one of my little birdies, where his wife grew up an hour south. Grew up and where he's a teacher back in his hometown. It is closed. Those parks are closed in his hometown, and his 2-year-old son turned to his dad, my little birdie, one of my best friends, and said, "Dad, I'm sad." And he went off, literally just got off the phone with this guy about 10 minutes before we started the podcast. Just go.
Let's see. Hey, John, we're kind of losing you there. So I might have to restate what you were just saying right there.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. He is so frustrated that his son, who's 2 years old, said that he's sad and doesn't know how to express what that means. But his son can't see his cousins, his friends, his playmates. They've been in lockdown for over 31 days in his neck of the woods. And my friend is saying, I'm over it. I'm getting ready to tear down the yellow tape that's around the parks, take Lysol wipes, wipe everything down, and let my son have some freedom, because this isn't 1984 East Germany. So I would agree with that. It's been absolutely awful, and the longer that this goes, the more people are going to get upset, the more that they're going to be depressed, the more that people are going to die, not because of coronavirus-related illnesses, not just because of suicide and depression, but we're going to have people dying because of cardiac arrest that wasn't treated, cancer surgeries that weren't done, chemo treatments that aren't being allowed to occur. The societal costs, not just the economic costs, are going to be astronomical, Jeff. We have no idea what we're doing. But Bill Gates says, oh, everyone is going to be vaccinated worldwide in 18 months. The SARS vaccine mutated 30 times over a 6-month period of time, and that's why they couldn't come up with a virus, and they abandoned it. They've been wanting to come up with an AIDS vaccine, which is similar to SARS and SARS-2 coronavirus, for 37 years. They still can't. So to hang our hat on a vaccine is just completely asinine. The likelihood of that coming around is using Schrute bucks from the office to be able to purchase a house. I don't think it's going to occur. But let's get started with our news. We've got a lot to cover. I'm going to start the timer right now, so that way we know what it is that, or how much time I have, so that way we don't bleed over. And there we go. Okay, so Wall Street Journal reports the Bank of England's governor has said that a 35% drop in GDP in the second quarter is plausible. I don't think it's plausible. I think it's probable, Jeff. And we're seeing reports of this where South Korea has already said that they have seen a 9% dip in GDP just in the last month. So as we move forward, we're going to find out the actual economic cost of this. But I think the further out we get, not just the economic, but the societal toll is going to be astronomical. There was chilling footage over the weekend from Maryland where hundreds lined up to just get a free bag of food or a $30 voucher to a local store. The lines were seen wrapping around the parking lot and the building itself, showing the extent of the desperation. We will link to that video in our notes. KWWL, from my old neck of the woods where I went to school, it's the NBC affiliate in eastern Iowa. They linked to a story this past weekend. The U.S. and Canada have agreed to limit border crossings to essential travel amid the pandemic. That agreement was due to expire this week. They've extended that for the next 30 days. Adam Housley, former reporter, senior investigative correspondent for Fox News, retweeted a story from USA Today saying that Vietnam is accusing China of mislabeling products as Vietnamese in order to avoid U.S. tariffs. That's something to keep an eye on as we move forward, Jeff. What are your thoughts on that?
So basically, with that, they're if I'm following that story correct, they're just are they mislabeling that intentionally to avoid tariffs?
They're deceptively mislabeling products that they create in China and say that they're made in Vietnam so that they can avoid U.S. tariffs. And Vietnam is accusing the communist Chinese of doing this.
Well, I mean, in all reality, they already do that even here in the United States. So, and this is one of the things where, as Americans, we have to be, careful, and we need to know the brands that we're buying from and that sort of thing. So, I know within the food industry, one of the things that's already happening is that they'll say "made in the USA" on food products, but really what they did is they grew it here, then they ship it to China to package and process and manufacture and all that kind of stuff, and then they ship it back here. But they don't say processed and packaged or anything like that in China. They just say made in USA. So even if you're trying to avoid buying things from China, whether it's because of having an America First attitude or trying to avoid a lot of these diseases that are coming out of China, even then it's difficult to avoid that because of the mislabeling and not honest tactics by these companies. So, I'm not surprised that this is happening. I mean, it's already happening here in the U.S., so.
Drudge Report tweeted over the weekend, Spain authorizes military planes to spray disinfectant over cities. There's not going to be any problems from that. I can see that they're doing it out of an abundance of caution, but spraying disinfectant over cities, unless everybody's inside, Agent Orange much?
Chemtrails, anybody?
And you sound crazy when you say that, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, well, spraying Lysol all over the place with planes.
Well, we're already doing stuff like that. I mean, there was one day I was out driving around out here in California, and we're in a drought, and I was watching, and literally there was I had to drive for a while, right? There was planes going all across the sky, putting out chemtrails, right? And you're like, okay, that's interesting. They always say it's like little ice crystals that are coming off, and I'm watching it. All of a sudden, these we call them chemtrails, but the trails coming off of the plane, all of a sudden, they're forming and they're joining together and creating clouds. Guess what? The next day we got rain, and we're in the middle of a drought. And so they're already using planes for manipulations or using it for certain technologies or whatever it is. So again, with this, I'm absolutely not surprised because they're essentially already doing this. They're probably just going to throw a different chemical in there.
Now, this was interesting. Mayor Bill de Blasio in New York City, he tweets out a video saying, how do you report places that aren't enforcing social distancing? It's simple. Snap a photo and text it to 311-692. People did that. We found out yesterday that they filled that text line with penis pics and Hitler memes. And I say that is definitely the right call. They've had to shut that down, and now they're filtering that. But that is exactly the right call. I will allow that, Jeff. Trolling godless pagans for their totalitarian, dictatorial means is the best use of your freedom. At this moment, next moment, it's going to be, we're going to start marching on the mayor's house. And if you don't give us back your freedoms, an American revolution becomes a French revolution, where we drag you out by your skivvies, and we give you a little what for. And I live near New York City. They're not going to be afraid to do that. Why? Forget about it. That's why.
Yeah.
U.S. Daily Mail tweeted over the weekend as well, because we're trying to get caught up on all the stories that we need to, because we've got to get through the digital stack of stuff. U.S. Daily Mail tweeted, devastated U.S. farmers now plowing crops back.
Let's see. We're losing you again, John. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we're losing you again. You're cutting out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're coming in now. The picture's still kind of frozen, but at least your voice is coming in.
Okay. Farmers are plowing their crops back into the soil due to lack of demand. This coming from the U.S. Daily Mail, and we're finding out that farmers at least in Homestead, Florida, are having to destroy their crops because of lack of demand. And you're not hearing this in mainstream cable news. You're not hearing from it from the drive-by media conglomerates.
Why do you think that there's no demand? I mean, everybody's still eating food.
Well, you've got restaurants, lack of demand there. You have schools that are closed, so you have a lack of demand food there. So now the demand has shifted to everything, convenience stores and drive-throughs that are open. But the thing is that if demand for dropped by over the last month, then wouldn't it make sense that demand for crops, demand for food, and demand for pretty much at 30% as well? Because we're more, just by a drop in one area, and that's how you transport stuff, and that's how you move goods and services. Well, if people aren't moving, people aren't traveling, then there's less stuff being consumed. So we're having a problem basically just because there's a lack of demand. Grocery stores are doing fine. The thing is, though, is that now we're having problems where we're worried about shut down pork producing plants. We've shut down 50% of America's pork, and now we're starting to shut down beef producing plants. We'll get to that later, but I think that that's part of the reason why. You start shutting off the spigot in one area, you're going to see the dominoes begin to fall everywhere else. Would you agree, Jeff?
No, I would totally agree, and again, it just kind of shows the wide repercussions for what we're experiencing right now with these decisions by the big government, authoritarians.
Right. The highlight from this story is farmers are ripping up their own crops because of lack of demand. Photos show farmers in Homestead, Florida, plowing over eggplant bushes. Trump has announced a $19 billion relief program as of last Friday from the USDA to help farmers cope with the impact of the coronavirus. It'll include $16 billion in direct payments to producers and mass purchases of meat, dairy, vegetables, and other products. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue said having to dump milk or plow under vegetables ready to market is not only financially distressing, reduce them. Now, 3 weeks ago, Sonny Perdue said that he had no concerns about America's food supply chain. Yesterday, I've got the screen capture of him with Neil Cavuto. I paused it when I read this, and I had to rewind it and take it back so I could actually see what it was, because I thought my eyes were deceiving me. It wasn't. I have the photo. 3 weeks later, 17 days later, basically, so less than 3 weeks later, Sonny Perdue is on Neil Cavuto on Fox News and says he now does have concerns about America's food supply chain. So what changed in 17 days? I know that you're getting new data. Maybe things were great then, but now they're not. But anyone could tell with a brain, if they weren't lying to you, this was always going to come about. This was always going to happen, Jeff. And everything that we've been predicting, everything that we've been talking about is now coming true. Why? Because, as I say, you can just read the tea leaves. You can see what's coming in the future. And it's like our elected leaders and bureaucrats are believing in a reality that isn't based in facts and data. It's in wish casting.
Yeah, well, and they're all blinded by their ideology, and so they would rather push their ideology than reality. And so, like, even when facts are going against what their philosophy on politics or government or whatever it is says, they just keep digging their heels in, and they keep going. They don't care if everything implodes. It's like, as long as they stick to their guns, they're going to be fine. So,
right. Bloomberg News also reporting on Saturday that Guggenheim Financial's Scott Minerd said gains in the S&P 500 are, quote, unsustainable, and that he believes that the S&P 500 will fall as low as $1,200 when it retreats. I have been saying this since the start of the podcast. You injected $6.6 million in liquidity into the stock market to keep it afloat. Meanwhile, we just found out today with the newest jobs report, an additional 4.4 million people were put onto the unemployment breadlines last week. What does that mean? Upwards of 26.6 million people have been laid off in the last 5 weeks because we have turned off the economy. That does not include the additional 7 million that were already on the books before this occurred, because our unemployment was at 3.2%. Add that up, Jeff. 26.6 plus 7 million. What does that mean? You're already at over 33 million people unemployed. And remember, we found out last week that the Fed was estimating 50 million people are going to be unemployed before Americans begin to go back to work. But if you're going back to work and you're having to put in social distancing measures, that means half of those people are not going to be able to go back to work because you're going to have to put in more draconian measures just to be able to turn on the economy. You're going to have 15 to 20% unemployment for at least the next 18 months. Great Depression much? No, it's going to be more like a Greater Depression, because at the height of the Great Depression in 1933, the unemployment rate was 25.3%. We're going to surpass that. They're already expecting upwards of 30% unemployment in the second quarter. You can't just turn off a $20 trillion economy and then turn it back on lickety-split. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have problems shutting off the oil fields in the oil shale in Colorado, in Texas, in Oklahoma, because we can't find places to store the oil. We are shutting down, and because there's a lack of demand, people aren't driving. You cause fear, people aren't going to travel. Then you're going to have more lack of demand not more, but you may have demand that increases, but not as much as previous levels, because people either aren't going to stay home, or either aren't going to go back to work and they're going to have to stay home, or they're going to be fearful and they won't leave their home. So then that means less consumption, less trucks on the road that are bringing you the food. There's going to be less people working in convenience stores, because there's going to be less convenience stores because they can't stay afloat, because people aren't traveling. How do convenience stores make their money? People buy the fuel. They don't make money off that. They break even, and then they go into the convenience stores where there's a huge 50% markup on everything that's in the store, and that's how they make their money. Well, if you're not traveling, and a third of travel is now gone over the last month, then what does that mean? Those convenience stores are going to struggle to stay afloat because their demand has been cut by a third in travel for the refueling that people need. So then that means people aren't buying the goods that keep their businesses going. The ripple effects of this and the dominoes that are going to fall, absolutely astronomical, and no one's talking about it. It's mind-boggling.
It just shows. Goes to show that government needs to stay out of the economy. Every time they get involved, they make things worse. A lot of times it's based off of political ideologies, not on reality, not on fact, and it has serious repercussions. And in my opinion, all of this chaos falls directly on the shoulders of our governmental leaders. And in my opinion, anybody who was for it should be voted out in this next election.
I would agree. And my little birdie in the Illinois Department of Health told me last night over the phone. He said prophetically with some things that he's been praying about, but just his gut feeling, he thinks that there's going to be a huge changing of the guard over this election and then 2 years from now, because our elected officials in both parties are so tone deaf. And I would agree. I think that there is going to be a changing of the guard. There's a lot of primaries that are being postponed, but he was saying that probably in 2022, because of the massive turmoil of what's occurred, there's going to be a massive change in both parties for fresh leadership, because a lot of these people, they're going to be reminded that when Rome was burning, they were inside their ivory towers. They weren't doing anything. They were hunkering down, eating ice cream, and tweeting.
Yep. So
remember that come this fall, and remember that come 2022, because you're going to need to primary most. We expect the Democrats to be godless pagan progressives, but you're going to need to remember that there are Republican Republican progressives that stood idly by and did nothing for you. All they did was tweet. All they did was get on Fox News and other conservative channels, and they virtue signaled for your way of life. Well, we need to do this. Well, you're not doing anything. You're just staying at home. So once again, you're not leading by example. You're just feeding pablum to the plebeians. I say no more, Jeff. No more. All of them need to be voted out. If we don't have term limits, you should institute personal term limits for your elected officials as well. 3 terms for someone that's in the House, 2 terms for a senator. Once those go away, then you never vote for them again. And you make sure that you work to primary them and get them the heck out of the 666 area code. The U.S. Daily Mail tweets, and this is terrible. Americans may lose beer, seltzer, and soda as CO2 supplies now go flat because of drops in ethanol production during the pandemic. Take away people's alcohol, and there will be riots in the streets.
Yeah, I mean it's sad but true. But at the same time, maybe that'll help the liver disease which coronavirus is attacking. So maybe it's a secret mission here.
There you go. Zero Hedge reporting that U.S. government officials may pay shale drillers billions to leave oil in the ground. Why? Because we simply don't have the demand for it right now, and we've got to keep the industry afloat in order to be energy independent. The last thing you want to do is shut off these spigots and let these places go belly up, and then you've got to go to war, and you can't produce your own energy. John Solomon from justthenews.com reports the average price of gas in the United States is now $1 a gallon lower than it was last year. That's the first indicator, Jeff. The first indicator. We are now beginning a stage of deflation. Ultimately, you think, oh, well, that's good. No, because where does that end up? Eventually, that ends up costing you value in your house, because we're going to have another house bubble. And you're going to see that eventually the number one asset that people have is their house. Those are now going to be predicted to be, mark my words, by the end of this year, they're going to say that we're going to be in a stage of deflation, and the average market value for houses are going to drop by 30 to 50%. So if you can buy low, that's great. But if you bought high and your house is now devalued, that means it's going to be very hard for you to sell it, and it's going to be harder for you to make the payments.
Yeah, well, and also throw in there that I think that's another reason why we need to get rid of the capital gains tax on selling houses. We need to find a better way of dealing with that situation, because you're dealing with it just goes to show, like, you're literally dealing with somebody could lose, they bought it, several years ago, and then they're losing value on it, then they sell it. So not only did they lose value on the house, but then they're having to pay the capital gains tax on top. It's like a double whammy. We need to figure out a new system because of inflation and deflation, and how the government, again, is manipulating the economy through that and really affecting people's lives. So it's just another idea I wanted to throw out there.
I'd also add on to that, Jeff, and I want your thoughts on this as well. If you're going to cancel schools which are funded by property taxes based on the assessment of the value of the house, shouldn't those taxpayers, property taxpayers, get a credit back because all that money was not used for education because you canceled it 2 to 3 months before the school year was ended? Plus, if these values begin to drop, then I would say do like my mom has done in Iowa. Go to your county assessor's office and have them reassess the house and say, it's not worth this much. I'm not paying this much in property taxes. You have to reassess this because the value is now under what it was when you valued it before.
Yeah. Well, and also throw on top of the fact that more than likely, property tax is actually unconstitutional. Because essentially what you're doing, what you're actually doing, is you're essentially renting your property from your local city and local counties. And in all reality, you're supposed to be able to own your property. You're not supposed to have to be paying annual rent for the property that you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, out here in California to own. So in all reality, it should be technically unconstitutional. And I would strongly encourage any conservative politicians out there to really make that change, because to me it's so wrong, unethical, immoral, and again unconstitutional.
You're paying rent for your own land that you bought yourself.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
So just go one step further and say it's unconstitutional. And I think that you're going to start seeing people that are going to start returning to those type of means, and they're going to be seen as on the fringes when this starts, but then eventually it's going to grow. If you don't think that the Tea Party was taken over in 2010 by grifters, but if you want to see people that are going to return to, we want less government, we want more personal liberties, we want we want less taxes, smaller, smarter government, as a friend of mine used to say, you want to see that return in droves, this will ignite that fire.
Yep. What
we're seeing now. And that's what you're trying to do at the American Conservative Movement. I'll let you plug that here for a minute, because you've got a lot of things that are going on there that tie in with the Gatekeepers podcast and also with this news show, and that is a huge catalyst to be able to bring about change.
Oh yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do with the American Conservative Movement is try to bring conservatives together, and a lot of this was in response to all this big government overreach by the government during this coronavirus crisis, and so I think so for us, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how we can unify conservatives, because what we're seeing the left and liberals they're unifying around their progressive ideology, and they're all in lockstep. And then conservatives are typically all splintered off, and everybody's doing their own little thing and that sort of thing. So we're trying to figure out how can we kind of be that hub. Let's bring people together, connect people across different organizations and groups and things like that. I know that we'll be announcing some stuff here pretty soon, but we're working on doing something for the May 1st protest and rallies. Stay tuned on something about that. Something really big we're working on there. And then we're just doing like online conferences, but really trying to educate the public on constitutional values, why it's important that we preserve our freedom and liberty. It's not just a selfish thing. It's not just an economic thing, but it literally comes down to freedom. It comes down to human rights. It comes down to the very essence of who we are as America. And so that's really one of our big pushes. So if you guys want more information on that, go to AmericanConservativeMovement.com. And it's separate from the GK. But there's a lot of crossover in the sense of the people that are involved. But it is a completely separate organization, completely separate focus, and that sort of thing. But yeah, check it out, AmericanConservativeMovement.com.
Mark Levin linked to a story from MIT. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology had a study and analysis that New York's decision to cut back on subway trains and public buses caused crowding, so more people went on to fewer subway cars and buses, which created the pandemic's ground zero in the city. You're not seeing that type of problem in Los Angeles or in San Francisco, Jeff, and those are with New York City, and then you add in Chicago and Dallas and Atlanta. We're talking about the top 6 most populated cities in the country. New York City's ground zero. It's cold, it's wet, it's damp, and then you kept public transportation going. Meanwhile, these other places are in warmer climates. They don't have a subway system. In San Francisco, for example, they have trolley cars. They have buses, but it's a warmer climate than New York City. And what does this virus hate? Warmer climates. That's why you're not seeing it abound and grow in those type of places where there's plenty of sunlight and plenty of heat. It's just some of the decisions that the New York City's Department of Health, their health director, and the New York City mayor made just show you how completely aloof, inept, obtuse they are completely are. They are detached from reality. And if you're watching this in this area, you need to do everything in your power to get those people out of office. Because not only have they cost you your freedoms, your way of life, your economic security, but keeping you in your home, they're literally threatening you with worse health, not better health. And that's just the scientific fact. We're not denying the virus. We're not virus truthers. The virus continues to build and grow inside conditions of 74 degrees or less. So you keep people inside their homes, they're at more of a risk to become infected. You need to be outside. You need to be in sunlight. And what we should have done is we should have just kept going with what we were doing and let the economy grow, let the economy continue to flourish and build herd immunity. But for some reason, in an era where 500 years ago we would have done that and just build herd immunity, and we knew where to go to the bathroom, and we knew what marriage was, now we deny reality. We don't know what marriage is. We don't know what race, gender, and life is. We don't know where to go to the bathroom. And now we're like, oh, we don't know what the scientific fact of herd immunity is. We're the double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways, professing themselves to be wise. They became utter fools, Jeff.
Yeah, well, and the thing is too is that more than likely we're already seeing the beginning of herd immunity, especially with that Stanford study that came out. And I don't know if you were going to be talking about this, but Steve Deace did a show on Wisconsin after when they had their primary election, and they had almost 500,000 people that went out and voted in one day. And he was saying it's like one of the greatest or one of the largest groups of people that left their homes in one day in America, right? And so you would think that there would have been a spike in cases of COVID-19 after that. Well, it was already on the downturn, and it kept going down. The curve kept going down and down and down ever since then. And I think that that's showing that, in support with what Stanford was saying, 50 to 85 times more people have had coronavirus, which thus makes them immune, which thus means we are on the cusp of herd immunity. And I think that Wisconsin is evidence of that, because so many people left their homes. So many people, I'm sure, were not social distancing. We're getting in crowds and things like that, waiting in line to go vote. There was not a spike in coronavirus cases, and I think that it's due to herd immunity, and I think we need to reopen things so that way we can actually get to full-on herd immunity, since it is such a low mortality rate, according to the Stanford study.
We don't need more tests of who has coronavirus without also having mass testing of antibodies. We need to be doing that simultaneously so that we actually know who has had the virus and how widespread this is and how minute the fatality rate is. People freaking out, oh, we have these many cases. Well, you don't know how many have already had it, and they're completely fine. Yep. So what we're doing is just completely foolish. Completely foolish. We're doing this back asswards. So it's totally dumb. Totally dumb. Bloomberg News reported that the Spanish government plans to extend a nationwide lockdown by 2 weeks after the country became the third nation to report more than 20,000 deaths linked to coronavirus. Not surprised. Europe loves totalitarianism. Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, Napoleon. We can keep going. So the draconian means in Europe, it's just another day ending in Y. And they will gladly roll over and do it. Why? Because the masses want their breadcrumbs. Now, over the weekend, Harvard Magazine came under fire because they linked to a story where their educational leaders were saying that you don't have the right to homeschool your children. They're not. They hate authoritarian leadership, but not authoritarian leadership from the government, because they believe that your children are wards of the state. That authoritarian leadership that is harmful to their children comes from parents themselves, and that 90% of those that homeschool their children do so from a conservative Christian viewpoint, and that it's a threat to society. Your thoughts, Jeff?
Again, this should be a wake-up call to everybody that we may have a problem here with the public school system, in that the left sees this as their opportunity to brainwash our children. And so that's something that we need to take seriously. And in my opinion, we need to stop sending our kids to public school, at the very least private school, if not homeschool. We need to stop playing these games. We need to stop allowing the government to brainwash our children with leftist progressive ideologies that are anti-God, anti-Christian, anti-everything that we believe in. And they're literally training up American children to be socialists, to be employees, to be yes men, and just go along and expect a handout and be entitled and have somebody else tell them what they can and can't do. We need to get past that. We need to change it. We need to fix it. And number one, we as conservatives, we believe in competition. So, hey, in my opinion, take your kids out of public school, go to private school, go to, homeschool your kids, take control of the education that children are getting.
I'd follow up with that by saying Dr. Vodi Bakum, a great theologian who now works in Africa at a Christian theology university over there. But Dr. Vodi Bakum said it best. Said, you can't send your children to be taught by Caesar and then be surprised when they come back acting like Romans. The thing is that they're being discipled in these schools, and if you think that taking them to church or teaching them freedom and liberty and constitutional values and biblical precepts for a couple hours every Sunday is going to overcome the 8 hours a day that they're at school, and then the 4 to 6 hours that they're on social media or in front of an entertainment boob tube box, they're being discipled in pagan progressive ideologies and worldview. If you think that a couple of hours each week is going to counteract that, you're gravely mistaken. And that's why you're seeing tons of children stand for constitutional principles and liberties and stand for socialism simply because they've been worked over. So you want to start taking your country back. Parents, do your dang jobs. One of my mentors said it best. He said, you want to know why America's in the sorry shape that it's in? It's because too many parents didn't do their dang jobs. So it starts with you in the home. And the fact of the matter is that this study from Harvard, or not study, this article from Harvard shows they hate you. They see you as a threat. They believe that your children are wards of the state, and that you don't have a right to teach your children in the way that they should go. Well, Scripture says, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's the job of a parent. But that statement is also morally neutral. It's not saying positive or negative. It's just saying the way you train a child is how he will grow and develop. So if you train them in constitutional liberties and in biblical precepts, they're going to follow that. But if you don't, and you teach them leftist pagan ideologies and precepts, they're going to follow that too. So the thing is that you can either disciple your kids and train them, or you can let the state teach them and train them. The choice is yours of what's happened to our culture over the last 30 to 50 years. Parents let government-funded education train up their children. And now we're left with the AOCs of the world, which we think are acting like donkeys. But the thing is that they're just a fruit of what we sowed. John Solomon of JustTheNews.com tweeted, CDC lab contamination reportedly delayed coronavirus testing rollout by 10 days. That's why we had massive delays in the coronavirus testing. More government incompetence on display. According to a new study from ABC 6 Action News, the Philadelphia ABC affiliate here in my neck of the woods, said the world may need to continue social distancing practices until 2022 in order to contain the spread of the coronavirus pandemic unless hospital capacity is increased or an effective vaccine is developed. I would say that is just more fake news, as these so-called experts want to control every aspect of your life and peddle it through panic porn. Now, this was a story you sent to me that we're getting to, Jeff. Federal judge blocked Kansas from limiting attendance at in-person religious worship services to check the spread of the coronavirus, signaling that the governor's policy violates religious freedom and free speech rights. That story coming from the Associated Press. I would say more cowbell, but I would also add, when did judges become the arbiter of rules?
Yeah.
They're black robe regiments that become their own constitutional oligarchies. When did that occur? And when did we believe that governors with a pen and a phone could become their own dictatorial regimes either? These people are drunk on power. I agree with what the judge said because he's going back to the Constitution. But the thing is that the precedent that we're saying is that the final arbiters are people that are their own independent constitutional conventions. And I would say, hell no.
Yeah,
because that type of oligarchy comes straight from the pits of hell. It's dictatorial and tyrannical.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing where I think moving forward we need to have some sort of oversight for checks and balances with the judicial system, because right now there are none. So basically, they're the final say. So, I know Mark Levin has put forth the idea of having Congress with being able to override a judicial ruling. With either 2/3 vote or 4/5 or 3/4 or something like that, something that's really strong, but at least there's a check and balance, because right now, they're basically rewriting law. Again, I'm grateful that this one judge is enforcing the law and enforcing the Constitution, and it's what all the judges should be doing. But it's unfortunate that there's only one that I've really heard of.
True. Very true. Now, in your neck of the woods, in churches are now legal in California thanks to a lawsuit victory. This was posted April 17th from the Contra Costa County Herald newspaper online. A victory Friday in a lawsuit on expression is forcing California to allow drive-in church services. The lawsuit against the state of California naming Governor Gavin Newsom over his executive order was filed by San Francisco attorney Harmeet Dillon, founder of the nonprofit Center for American Liberty, and co-counsel Mark Musser, on behalf of 3 Southern California churches and 1 parishioner. According to Twitter posts by Dillon, the government brief filed late Friday morning last week claimed that drive-in is a technology like a streaming video. And now, okay. In response to the executive order clarification by the opposition brief, Riverside and San Bernardino counties updated their health decrees to allow for drive-in worship. This development is a partial victory in our lawsuit, but it still does not allow in-building services, meaning people seeking spiritual guidance and fellowship safely are given no right to do so. But the same people can visit wine, pot, food, and laundry shops with a mask legally. We continue to wait for a ruling on a temporary restraining order, Dillon continued. People of faith are now should be treated no less favorably than any other group of people in California. Reportedly, termite guys, tree trimmers, baristas, stir-fry chefs, grocery workers, and customers of all have rights, and so do religious leaders and followers. She was asked why this applies to the entire state when she was only representing the 3 churches and 1 parishioner in Southern California. Because I sued the state of California over a statewide order that includes all counties. I would say good pushback by this parishioner, these 3 churches in Southern California, and also great story. But you didn't hear that story in your local news probably, Jeff.
No, not at all. And this is an important case for the right to peaceably assemble, for freedom of religion, freedom of speech. But one thing that we need to remember is that there's no exceptions in the Constitution right now. So if you want an exception, make an amendment, but don't just ignore what it says. And so if it says that you have the right to peaceably assemble, Governor Gavin Newsom does not have the authority to override that. And so that's one of those things where each church should be able to make the decision for themselves. Do we feel like it's safe to meet? Do we not? Are we going to do online or whatever it is? But that should be up to each individual church, not up to the government, unless we get enough states that are willing to pass a constitutional amendment and provide an exception for state of emergencies, which is currently not written into the Constitution. Thus, all of these authoritarian laws and governors and even federal government are overstepping their bounds and being unconstitutional.
Amen. More cowbell, Jeff. Preach. Praise the Lord. Whatever expressions I can say to fully agree with that, I can't say it enough. I would even go one step further and say you have to amend the Constitution in order to change it. You still have to do the same thing when you want to change a state constitution. At the state level, you have to amend it. So Californians should be outraged that their elected leaders are allowing their governor to do these things without amending the state constitution. Take your state back. And I would say that to anyone that is having to go through these draconian means. They're not following the voice of we the people. They're saying that they are the bosses of you. They're not. This is a government of, for, and by the people, made up of we the people. Take your country back. They do not boss you. You are the boss of them. They work for you. We don't work for them. That's how this country has always been. It's how it was always designed. But we're letting it slip away because we've been worked over like lemmings. And we think that $1,200 in a stimulus check is going to get us by when the average American needs to make $4,000 a month in order to get by. Because that's the average salary of a worker in America, $4,000 a month. $1,200 is a drop in the bucket. We need to go back to work, and we need to call out these oligarchs for their unconstitutional, pagan means of what they're doing to just be little dictatorial tyrants. KFOR, Channel 4 in Oklahoma, reports that America's largest retailer, Walmart, started requiring workers to wear face coverings starting Monday as the coronavirus pandemic ravages communities nationwide. A former New Jersey judge, according to the Washington Times, he said, quote, "A governor or mayor can no more craft a law and assign a punishment for its noncompliance than the courts could command the military or police." Who are governors to decide which human activities are essential? Amen. We need more people like that. More people that will use their influence and their means to say this is not right and tear down the wickedness in high places. And I think a lot more people are going to begin to wake up to this the longer this goes, Jeff. But then they're going to have a decision to make. Do we begin a new American Revolution, or, never underestimating total depravity, will we slip to a new French Revolution? I don't know where we go, and that's what we're trying to fight: a return to first things, a return to first principles, and that way we can get our country back. Otherwise, we are going to slip into an abyss of chaos and trouble. And this is going to be another French Revolution, and we're going to see riots in the streets. The Wall Street Journal reports that the number of renters using credit cards to make payments has risen by more than 30%. More landlords are agreeing to absorb transaction fees. Pardon me. I know that the apartment that we rent, for the last month, they have allowed weekly payments to make rent. They've also absorbed the transaction fees for doing online purchases or credit card or online payments or credit card payments. So that's already happening here, but we're now seeing data that more people are putting their rent on their credit card. So we're causing more debt. Once reflection that your government is a reflection of the people itself. When the average American has $15,000 worth in credit card debt and $45,000 in student loan debt, and now America's federal debt is $24 trillion, you get the government that you deserve. And right now, we're a nation in debt, and its citizens are awash in debt. It's just reflective of who we've become. Neiman Marcus, according to Reuters, will file bankruptcy as soon as this week. The retailer will not be able to stay afloat because of the coronavirus chaos. Clay Travis, who I love to follow from Outkick the Coverage, he linked to a Boston Globe study that shows antibody testing in the Boston area. 32% of random test participants who otherwise felt healthy had coronavirus antibodies, meaning that they had it and they didn't know they had already had coronavirus. More evidence that the virus is way more common and way less deadly than initially thought. From the Boston Globe, nearly a third of 200 blood samples in the Chelsea, Massachusetts area show that there has been mass exposure to coronavirus and that it's been far more contagious and far less deadly than previously thought. That also echoes the same studies that we've alluded to from Stanford Medical that are pointing to the same exact thing, Jeff.
Yeah, well, yeah, and again, that's one of those things. Like the evidence is just not supporting the big government, overreach that it keeps getting pushed to us by the mainstream media and our government leaders and that sort of thing. So it's definitely different than what we're being told.
There was an additional Boston study that Clay Travis actually added to this in his tweet storm. 36% of homeless people in the Boston area were tested and found positive for coronavirus. All but one of those people were asymptomatic, meaning they weren't sick enough to know they even had the virus. Jordan Schachtel of Blaze Media tweeted on Monday, and this is an older study, but the starting point is a 1% increase in unemployment was statistically associated to a 5.7% increase in homicides, a 4.1% increase in suicides, a 4% increase in prison admissions, and a 1.9% increase in deaths from liver and cardiovascular renal disease. We're going to kill more people, and we're going to cause more chaos in our society because we've shut this down completely across the board. Face masks have become mandatory in Pennsylvania as of 8 p.m. Monday. Beginning at 8 p.m. Monday night, all employees and customers of essential businesses across the state were required to wear protective masks, according to 6 ABC Action News out of Philadelphia. Mediaite posted a video of Washington Governor Jay Inslee blasting Trump for his dangerous support of lockdown protests, saying that he's encouraging illegal activity. When did peaceably assembling and airing your grievances and using your constitutional God-given rights to peaceably assemble for freedom of speech, when did that become illegal, Jeff? Because I didn't get that memo. I didn't see that constitutional amendment on the ballot.
No, and that's the thing that we keep saying is just, all of these all this overreach is completely unconstitutional, and we're seeing it happen before our eyes. We now know, Jenny Beth Martin, this is staggering. This was as of Monday. Jenny Beth Martin tweeted, 590 Americans per minute are losing their livelihoods due to the extreme lockdowns by state and local governments. 34,000 Americans are losing their jobs per hour. We need to begin to balance social distancing and opening up our economy, and we must start doing so ASAP. Amen. ABC 7 Eyewitness News, which is the ABC affiliate here ABC 7 out of Chicago, reporting that Bill Cosby has been denied a request for early prison release because of COVID-19. His lawyers say he is now blind and has had heart surgery in the last year. Bill, thoughts and prayers. Bloomberg is reporting that a fear of an impending car price collapse is now gripping the auto industry. They're expecting prices to drop by 30% because there's a lack of demand for your product. New Zealand will begin easing its lockdown restrictions next week, according to Bloomberg News. Opening churches and stores, according to a poll, is now a priority for all Americans, according to the ChristianPost.com, Jeff. As we begin to wrap up, a new survey shows that Americans want gathering in homes and churches to be allowed right away when the lockdown ends. Asked to prioritize the reopening of various activities and whether it should happen right away, half of respondents said that allowing people to gather in small groups at someone's home should happen right away, while 35% said churches and other religious gatherings should be opened as soon as possible, according to a Rasmussen report survey. 35% also supported reopening retail stores, and 31% said the same about schools. Only 21% felt the same way about reopening bars and restaurants. 14% said the same about reopening major league sporting events and stadium concerts. That was a study of 1,200 registered voters conducted from April 9th to April 11th. So as we begin to wrap up, finding that it's being reported, we heard this over the weekend, that, or actually a couple days ago, not over the weekend, it's being reported that the Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the Washington Post confirmed that all of those websites have been hacked and thousands of emails, passwords, and documents have been leaked online. One of those documents are showing that the virus has similarities to the SARS-1 virus and has a delivery system that is similar to V. That it may have, and that
this virus may have been spliced together in this lab. Frightening, Jeff.
Yeah, well, like that, I think it was Patrick Wyatt has been talking about on the Shine Light podcast that he's like, it seems like this is a biologic weapon, seems like this is manufactured in a lab, especially with things that it's targeting and things like that. So, I mean, in all reality, I'm not surprised by anything. I don't, it's like, whether it's dealing with Bill Gates and vaccines or dealing with, somebody making this virus or whatever it might be, at this point, I'm not surprised about anything.
We'll close with a bit of good news from our buddies at Discern News. Chick-fil-A, those doers of good with their Jesus yummy chicken, saying that they have donated nearly $11 million already in COVID-19 relief. On Tuesday, Chick-fil-A announced that it had donated $10.8 million funds across the country to assist healthcare workers, first responders, and other Americans affected by the coronavirus outbreak. The chain said on its website that it would be distributing the money to local communities through its network of more than 1,800 independent owner-operators in order to make an immediate impact on the needs of local communities, including food donations or items to first responders, healthcare workers, Chick-fil-A team members, and their families. The chain has also said that it has donated over 5,000 meals to frontline workers and has given over 7,700 cases of fresh produce to the charity Feeding America. Once again, Chick-fil-A leading by example, servant leadership. And as we close, that's my final thought. The way it should be, my commentary. The way it should be is we should be leading by example. Servant leadership has always been how we have been taught throughout the ages that people are supposed to lead by example and serve others in need. You learn that people who have a title and are in management, they manage people, but they don't lead by example. Servant leadership teaches us that you don't manage people unless you can manage yourself. So if you lead by example, you then have a platform where you want to lead others to water and help them drink themselves. So I would close by saying, be a servant leader in this time of need. Be a person who leads by example with your friends, with your neighbors, with your church members, with your coworkers. Check on them, call them, FaceTime them, email them, text them, Zoom them, Skype them. What do they need? How can you help? Because to whom much is given, much is required. And if you take that opportunity to show servant leadership, where you want to lead by example by serving others who need the help, you're going to have more opportunity to speak truth and life into their lives. And you're going to be able to open doors of opportunity to be able to bring people back to first things, to have the conversations that are going to need to be had. And if you want that to occur, if you want revival to occur in our country, and if you want to return to first principles, constitutional values, and biblical precepts, it's going to start by creating a grassroots wildfire. And that begins by having the conversations with the people that are in your sphere of influence. So be a servant leader today and begin to plant the seeds for freedom and liberty tomorrow. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty.
Yeah, and what I wanted to close with was just a brief talk on always being prepared. And I think that when we're dealing with a crisis like this, a lot of times this is like, and we've talked about this before, but this is like when everybody they begin to read their Bible and they begin to pray and that sort of thing. But the thing is that we need to be doing that kind of stuff all the time, in good times and in bad, and not just rely on those things during the bad times, but also during the good times. And also too is like take the opportunity when we get out of this to stay in God's word, keep praying, but then also to educate yourself, be prepared, both theologically, philosophically, and politically, in the good times, so that way when a crisis does happen, we're not caught by surprise again, and we're not without preparations and without anything to fall back on. And again, that goes spiritually, financially, physically, with food, with whatever it might be. So don't just take for granted the good times and then freak out when the bad times happen. Always be prepared. Prepare your heart, prepare your mind, prepare your kitchens with food. Stay stocked up in general. Don't just get caught surprised when something bad happens, because you never know when something's going to happen. It's always better to be prepared, and then when something does happen, you're not freaking out. You're not completely caught off guard. You're ready to get through it. You're trusting in God. And you're taking the proper precautions and being wise stewards of your resources. So that's just what I kind of wanted to leave everybody with as well. But yeah, this is day or episode number 14 of the America Held Hostage podcast. We shall be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for another round, more news, more talk, more response to what's going on. And again, everything's just looking through the prism of a Christian and conservative worldview. So yeah, John, another news day. We're wrapping up, and then I'm sure there'll be like a whole week's worth of stuff, coming back tomorrow.
It's true. We'll try and get through the digital stack of stuff tomorrow. You can find me at @jhinton_ on Twitter, and I'll be posting news links that are relevant, and it's going to be stuff that we'll be covering tomorrow. And if not, it's going to be in future podcasts. So find me at @jhinton_. And you can find Jeff at Jeff the GK, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. And then everybody check out gatekeepersonline.com/plugged-in for our membership program. Check that out. A lot of cool perks, including 30% off in our store. You'll get access to our Destroy Social Justice conference. You get recordings of our monthly episode, Connected. And then if you sign up for the annual membership, you'll get a free copy of our book, Social Injustice. So check that out, gatekeepersonline.com/plugged-in. And everybody have a good day, stay safe, and we'll be back tomorrow.